this is James with Northern Arizona Wind & Sun. Today we're going to talk about a grid interactive battery-based system. Kind of go through the various details of how to integrate the system in a home, the various equipment that you would use, and the general concepts for how the power is managed and where the energy is used. This is essentially the main panel for the house. It's a 200 amp service and it comes from the grid underground here in our community. So this was the original house's main panel. All the circuits for the home and everything were inside this panel. The way I have this system set up is I moved all these circuits, and I'll show you here in a minute. But the power from the grid comes in, goes through the meter, and then goes into the service panel and effectively to all the circuits within the home. Okay, so a normal home will typically have something like this. Now ours is on the outside of the house, but you know, sometimes you'll find them inside a garage or, you know, some sort of electrical closet or something like that. So here in this particular system, being that this is grid interactive, we have the ability to feed through and back to the panel with this system, and also feed a critical load center. Because this is a battery-based solution, if for some reason the grid goes down, I still have a panel with all of my essential circuits in it that will be powered up without the grid there. From the electrical service, the power flows to the inverter. Okay, so this is a skybox, an Outback skybox, and we effectively have the grid connected to this as well as our critical panel, our critical load center. There's also batteries connected to it and a solar array up on the roof. This particular inverter is constantly monitoring the state of the grid. If the grid goes out of whack, the voltage, frequency is not within spec, this inverter immediately disconnects from the grid. So anything that would be in the main panel will lose power. As soon as the grid goes down, everything in there loses power. But this system has batteries, it has the solar, and it can maintain sustainably the critical loads panel. So over here is our critical loads panel. This panel has all of the loads that would be backed up in the event of a power outage. In my house, this is everything. My furnace, my lighting, all of our receptacles, water heating, everything that I have in my house, for the most part, is maintained sustainably by the inverter system in the event of a power outage. I also do what's called grid neutral. While this inverter can sell back to the grid, I also have it set up so that it doesn't sell back to the grid. So I'm trying to maintain sustainably all of my power consumption without needing the grid or supplementing the grid, if I can. The inverter is constantly trying to sustainably power from batteries and solar all of these loads, which are basically my entire house. So if it's absolutely necessary, then it will pull power from the grid, but it's completely configurable. If the inverter is making an excess and abundance of power, then you can configure it to sell to the grid. If you don't want it to sell to the grid, you can configure it not to sell to the grid. There's even a feature that allows you to offset loads in the main panel without it actually exporting to the grid. Okay, it's essentially called self-sustaining. So these loads in the critical load center are backed up even with a grid failure. But if you wanted to offset loads inside this panel, you can put CTs, which are current transducers, on the main lines. The inverter can power the loads during normal operation, the grid's up, power the loads inside here, but you can even tell it not to push excess power to the grid. So it'll offset the loads inside this panel. But if the grid ever goes down, it's only backing up this panel's worth of loads, the critical loads. I don't have any super heavy loads in my house. We don't have like an electric range or an electric water heater. So it's very easy for one skybox, in this case, to keep my house completely sustainable. If you had, you know, really heavy loads, you can stack multiple skyboxes together and configure them in a parallel configuration so that you can have, I mean, this is 5,000 watts, 10, 15, 20, there's a limit at some point, but you know, this particular product can be stacked in multiple configurations to essentially build up, you know, an abundance of power. So next we'll go and talk about the solar array. Okay, so behind me is the solar array. This particular array consists of 20 330 watt REC modules. Okay, so they're wired in 2 strings of 10. We have about 400 volts going to the skybox, about 6,600 watts. The skybox is a 5,000 watt inverter. It's not too hard for this array to max it out, which is no big deal. It'll just clip the excess power. We used Tamarack roof mounts to secure it to the roof. This is a pitched roof configuration. Underneath the rail, you can see the rails. And then we also used quick bolt flashings to make it waterproof into the asphalt shingle roof. Okay, so on the side of the array, we have a junction box that ties into the conduit here and a roof jack, and we come down through the roof and run along underneath the soffit all the way back to the skybox. So there's 2 strings of 10 panels ran individually to the skybox. So there's a total of 2 positives and 2 negatives plus a ground conductor inside that conduit, and it runs all the way to the skybox. It's probably about 70 feet or so of total conduit. So that's the solar array that powers the skybox. One of the last components to discuss is the battery bank. So let's go in and take a look at the battery bank. Okay, so just on the other side of this wall is the skybox. Okay, so these are 2 Discover 48 volt 7.4 kilowatt hour batteries. Total storage capacity here is about 14.8 kilowatt hours of capacity. Usable is about 13.2. So with an 80% depth of discharge, I can sustain 13.2 kilowatt hours from these batteries alone. They're 51.2 volts nominal at 130 amp hours each. They're wired in a parallel configuration. We have the negative going to the negative and the positive going to the positive. And then I have the negative going to the inverter, coming over here to this particular battery's negative, and the positive coming over here to this particular battery's positive. The run is on 4-aught cable, and then I just have them paralleled on 2-aught. The 4-aught wire is probably oversized for this particular application. You'd most of the time only need to use 2-aught cable, but it really just depends on how long your run is. This battery bank here is inside an electrical closet. The batteries themselves, they actually go inside a box that I have built around them. And then I run some USB cables out that connect to the batteries in case I need to do any firmware updates, or if I want to monitor the state of the batteries. You can hook them up to a laptop and pull up the Discover AES dashboard and log right into the batteries and see their state, check on the cells, and check on their state of charge directly through the battery. The skybox is also monitoring state of charge. It's counting energy flow in and out of the batteries, but if we ever want to confirm through the battery level, we can go ahead and just use a USB directly into the battery and connect it up to the PC. Okay, so we addressed the 3 main components that we used in the system: the skybox, the solar array, and the Discover batteries. We talked about the general integration of the skybox with the grid and some of the solar connections and hardware used to mount the panels. If you have any questions or would like to do a similar system, feel free to give our team a call and they'll put together a solution for you, and we can tailor that solution based on your expectations. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and comment.